Customer experience is spoken of a lot today by practitioners and academics alike. Stan, is it fundamentally new or is it a rehash of old concepts?
No, I think customer experience, like everything else, is something borrowed, something new. But I think it's an advance in how we think about engaging with customers. If you take a very, very long view of what's happened in industry, go back to the 1980s and we moved into the quality management revolution, which has largely worked. I don't know any company that's engaged with a process-led view of their business, which has gone back to the old disjointed functional view. So total quality management, improving the quality, worked a lot for the car industry. Great. Everybody said, whoa, okay, quality, good stuff. And then a few people said, hey, but services are really important. It's not just about making cars. The service economy is at least as big as the products economy. So if all this good process management and statistical control and the whole Six Sigma quality approach works in products, certainly it'll work in services. And so we had the concept of service quality, which is to deconstruct things that we go through as customers, our experiences, into episodes, discrete episodes that are amenable to the sort of statistical analysis that drives a quality management perspective. And that, again, works to a point. It ensures at least that operationally systems aren't broken. So you make a phone call, the phone is answered in a certain amount of time. The person at the other end of the phone has certain minimum information in front of them, doesn't disclose things they shouldn't disclose. And so you do need that sort of service quality element. And so there was a huge investment in service quality, which was seen to be a way of making services more systematic, more deliverable. Okay, great. But again, something was seen to be missing there. Because we're human beings, we don't necessarily assess and appreciate the experiences we go through in such a disjointed, episodic fashion. And the other thing, of course, that these sort of statistical techniques struggle to capture is something called emotion. And we are human beings and we have emotions and we react to things emotionally. And that's not being irrational, that is how we are. In fact, many of the experiences we buy are emotional experiences. We go to restaurants for a good time. We go on holidays for a good time. When we travel, it's not just about getting from point A to B. There's anxiety we need to deal with. There is comfort that we want. There's a feeling that we've used our time productively, and so forth and so forth. So we realize that service quality is a useful an enhancement at the delivery and management of services, but it's not the whole picture. And that's where I think customer experience comes in. It takes these notions and adds to it the notion that we assess the value we derive from engaging with a supplier over an extended period of time, right? Not just when you've called the call center, not just when you're in the store, all the way until when you're using the goods and services you buy. The concept of we call value in use. Right? I don't buy a computer to get a 500 gig hard drive or 4 megabytes of RAM. I buy a computer so that I can be more productive in my researching, my writing, the development of my presentation material, communicating with friends, right? There's a value in use as opposed to the pieces of the computer, right? And so we understand that customer value happens over time, across episodes, relates to value in use, has emotional as well as functional components, and in some experiences is as much a function of your peers. When you go in a social setting, when you go to a hotel or a restaurant, value is as much about who's around you as what you're experiencing yourself. So the notion of what we experience and how we assess our experiences is more complex, occurs over a longer period of time, and adds emotional aspects as well, functional aspects, none of which is really totally captured or adequately captured, in my view, by our traditional concepts behind the measure service quality. And therefore, marketing scholars have taken this notion and I think moved forward with the notion of experience. Now, like any new area, and we're arguing a lot over what's in the box, what's out of the box. And I have a personal view that if we define experience too broadly and use that word holistic, which I don't allow my students to use, if we define it too broadly, it risks being the theory of everything. Conversely, if you're too narrow, you go back to the problem of excluding that which is really important to customers. So there's going to be some work between, both in research and in practice to scope this thing in an actionable, practical way, which doesn't destroy the concept. And organizations I think are engaging with that now.
It seems all the more difficult too, because you talk about in the paper it being, the experience being very context driven. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that means?
Of course, the more you move from this sort of episodic, controllable situation, the more, of course, experience depends on the industry you're in, and even within the industry, the context. How we will assess our experience, for example, of a hotel versus a train versus a retail shop versus buying a complex financial services versus buying electricity utility will change. And I think a lot of the initial work in scholarship around services, around customer experience, would suggest that you should look at these in your context. I think for companies it means that, unfortunately, the bad news is there's not going to be a little book off the shelf. You say, that's the experience, page 1. I think the companies that we work with, that we're researching, who are leading edge, what we call vanguard experience practitioners, have very much developed their notion of customer experience, their definition of what's in and what's out, through themselves specific to their industry.
So that's certainly one implication for management to think about.
Typically what we find is people, the first thing they start with is what we call channel integration. So again, we're going over data that we've researched around the world about how people manage customer experience, how they develop their programs, and there's certain common themes. And the first one is that when companies decide, yes, we're going to look at this, we accept there's this notion of experience, so we're going to start managing it, the very first thing they do is they look at all the various channels to market, all the various routes they communicate to customers, and try to get their arms around it to give one integrated experience. And then they start to look at experience over a broader period of time. So that's stage 1. Then they try to develop measures of it. Okay, and there's debates around that. Eventually they get to the point where they say, okay, we're doing a reasonable job at the bits we control, but we understand the experience from the customer's perspective is larger than our little piece. And then the vanguard type companies start looking broader at their partners, their suppliers, and they extend the experience management program through their supply chain. Right. So that if you're going to work with us and impact the experience our customers have with us, you must work in a way that we can vouch for the experience that you're going to provide. And so you start to manage a larger system around that. And that throws up a whole series of challenges, and people familiar with global supply chains, etc., will be familiar with some of those challenges. But now you're dealing with customers, which has their own dynamic and emotional aspects to it, etc. So you need good systems, you need good partnerships, perhaps different metrics, how you assess the people you want to work with, how you recruit and hire the people who work for you is all impacted. So I guess the second big piece of customer experience is it is a very broad concept, very broad, and therefore its implications across all aspects of management are equally broad. So if you're going to commit to a customer experience strategy, it's not something in a corner, in a box, driven by a piece of software with a couple of metrics attached to it. You really will have to look rather broadly. And again, with all these investments, scope it, start at an achievable level, build the competencies, the understanding of what experience means to customers and how they react to changes in their experiences, develop that and expand. We've yet to see, but again, early days in our research, the big bang approach in customer experience, everything happened at once. The vanguard companies that we identify as vanguard are committed. It's taken them time, and they've done it step by step by step, but with a clear view of what they're trying to achieve, and a real commitment from top management. This is important.
And it's great for the customer who's experiencing the benefits of that, but it's a challenge for the researcher and for the practitioner.
It is, because the advantage of service quality is the tighter you scope something, the more amenable it is to measurement and statistical control. The broader, dare I say, the more holistic, even though I struggle with that word, the broader you look, the more ambiguity there is. And you mentioned this article we wrote, targeted at practitioners, at research practitioners. Many of the measures we have about how happy customers are, reflect a TQM service quality framework. And once we move the concept of what we're trying to do towards experience, we need measures appropriate to a customer experience strategy. And we've developed and proposed one we call Experience Quality, XQ, which is a complex scale item, or in academic terms, a multi-dimensional scale of factors that we started off validating in UK mortgage context, but now in fact have research in 4 contexts. And the scale seems to have legs to it, and we've identified its core dimensions. That it's about the peace of mind, particularly, that you provide the customers. It is about how you react at the moments of truth. It is about how you perform. And so we can identify and get to a pretty granular level of attributes that companies can look at. And the technique we used is a form of statistical modeling, so that organizations can actually do some input-output sort of analysis. What would be the effect of investment in these areas on core marketing outcomes? We tend to look at customers' stated repeat purchase, and their stated word of mouth, and their stated satisfaction. So early days, it's evolving, but it is a major item for most organizations now. And like all new management trends, it's going to take a while to be universally understood. Implications are broad. You aren't going to get there at once, but if you take your first steps today, you will build the capabilities that will make it a sustainable improvement program.
Thank you, Stan.